I'm I guess we'll convene things. We had a few IT issues to work through, but everything works out in the end. So I'm happy for that. And our guest for me is up in the upper left-hand corner. Rick Rogers is a resident of Spencer, although he's a world traveler and author and story in the ancient traditions. So I want to thank him for to join us today, and Rick, take it away.
So Zach, can you make it so that I can see everybody?
I think what you have to do is in the upper right-hand corner, there's it says view.
Yes.
9 little things. Go up there and click gallery view.
There they are. Cool.
Get the Brady Bunch effect there.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Well, so, this is, I have to apologize. I have a feeling, as with many of you, the technology is not my area of expertise. And I was trying to get my son, who actually is in Mexico, with his mother visiting as we speak. And they were going to try to help me get this set up so I could actually be standing up in front of you rather than you just seeing my face. But we weren't able to make that work. So let me just share with you a little bit about my work. I was a classroom teacher for 4 years in the Buffalo area, and a middle school teacher. And I found that even though I knew I was in the right profession, I was in the wrong place. So I felt, if I wasn't an urban suburban teacher, maybe I was more destined to be a rural school teacher. So I resigned after 4 years. I packed up my van with all my teaching materials. I set off to find a rural school district in the state of Maine to start out with, because it had mountains and water. Now, I grew up in Florida, but I've spent a lot of time, I went to school here in upstate New York. So anyway, along that way, to find a rural school district where I could teach, I got this crazy idea that, gee, if I was a writer and if I wrote stories about the woods for children, then I could still be a teacher, but I could be independent and spend a lot more time outdoors. So I decided that instead of going back into a classroom, that I was going to become a writer of woodland fiction for children. And I would learn along the way that because of magic in the universe, that I also was a storyteller of the ancient oral tradition. I wouldn't get published for 7 years, but I started getting paid to be a storyteller. And it's through the storytelling that I was actually able then to be an author, a self-published author. And I did that for almost 19 years, almost all in elementary and middle schools, in different places in this country. My wife and I actually lived in New Zealand for a year, where I supported us as a storyteller. And so I've been very fortunate that this ancient art that I have been committed to has been very good to me, and it has taken me many places. And here I am with you this morning. So I'd like to share. Also, when I first started, I learned that I was a storyteller because I bumped into this old Canadian logger. And he lived in the old logging camps, and he was a storyteller, and he would share the old fairy tales that he could remember from when he was a kid in the old logging camps. And so when I met him, I started out by telling a lot of the old folk and fairy tales until I began to realize that I could share my own stories. And eventually, as I became successful as a writer, I shifted almost all to original material. But because I did school programs, I would write stories for kindergartners and first graders. I'd write stories for second and third graders, and I would work my way up to the middle school age. So the story that I'm going to share with you actually is a story that I would have written for the upper middle school kids. So you kind of have to put your, I was trying to think of a romper room. You have to put your Captain Kangaroo hat on so that you can just kind of keep in mind that I'm used to telling stories, to being in front of children, but your children too, and because we're all at heart. So here we go. This story that I would like to share with you is called Splatka Palatka. And as a writer, I found that sometimes I can take experiences that actually happened to me, begin to write them as they actually happened, and then my imagination will start to go to work, and I'm used to just letting it go. So this story goes like this. Many years ago, I was living in an old farmhouse on a hilltop outside of Candor. And it was winter, and it was a beautiful winter. It was cold, snows were deep, and normally I wouldn't leave New York State in the wintertime because I like winter. But this particular winter, it was pretty cold. So I thought, you know, Rick, maybe this is a time for you to go to Florida and visit with your mom and dad and my sisters, because that's where they lived. So I packed up my truck, and in those days I drove an old International Travelall. Now it was an antique truck. It was, only had 20,000 miles on it, but it was old and it was gray. So I affectionately called the truck Old Gray. And I got an Old Gray, and and it was one of those trucks made back in the old days when they used iron and heavy metal for trucks instead of rock music. So I got in my old truck and I took off for Florida. Well, at 55 miles an hour, going from New York State to Florida, it's a long drive. And after a while, in this country, when you're on the interstates, after a while, it gets to be a little much because it's, tractor trailer, tractor trailer, tractor trailer, tractor trailer. And the closer I got to Florida, the more there are the billboards with, go here, go there, do this, do that, eat this, get sick. I mean, I couldn't take it anymore. I thought, Rick, you need to get off the interstates. Well, it was my second night out. So I looked down at the map and I could see that if I kept driving in about an hour, which would put me about maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, because it was getting late, I would be on the other side of Jacksonville, Florida, in that northeast corner. And there was a 2-lane blacktop that worked its way into a state forest. So I thought, Rick, get to that road, get to the state forest, you can stop for the night. So I kept driving and I got on that state road. Now it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. And in my old truck, I was always used to sleeping in the truck rather than looking for a motel. So I drove, and there's nobody else on the road. I found an old logging road. So I pulled up that logging road, got far away where nobody would be able to see me. And then I shut the truck off, and I knew I'd be able to get a good night's sleep because I was far enough away from the big city that I wouldn't have to worry about weirdos, wackos, or Republicans. And then I fell asleep. And I got up the next morning, drove to the next town, little diner. I love stopping at diners for breakfast. So I had a nice breakfast at the diner, got back in my truck, and I started driving. And I thought, it doesn't get any better than this. I'm on a 2-lane road in Florida. I got the window. New York State, 2 days before, I'm in cold and big jacket. Now I'm in Florida. I got the window open. I got a t-shirt on. I got food in my belly. I got money in my wallet. My truck's running like a Japanese digital. And I thought, it just doesn't get any better. Well, then it didn't take long before I realized that there was something off to the east behind the woods. And as I looked closer and then I looked down at the map, I could see that it was water. Well, water always makes traveling more pleasant. So, I'm trying to look over at this, and I realized it was the St. Johns River. And I'm trying to look at the river, but I'm also realizing, I'm in this big chunk of iron at 55 miles an hour. If I want to stay alive, I need to keep my eyes on the road. But as I'm glancing over, I can see that now as I'm driving along, it's not just the river. There's something back there. And as I'm glancing more and more, I realized It's a building behind the trees, except this building seems to go on for blocks and blocks. And I can tell there are no windows. I thought, this is really strange. And then the treetops open up, and I can see that next to this skyscraper that's laid down on its side with no windows, there's this huge concrete funnel rising up into the sky. And I thought, Rick, what do men make that's huge and concrete and rises so high above the treetops that God wouldn't make it? And then I realized a nuclear power plant. Well, I don't know about you, but just being around a nuclear power plant gives me the heebie-jeebies. I mean, I knew a guy, he lived 12 miles from a nuclear power plant. He told me one day his little boy came in and said, Daddy, Daddy, there's a creature in the front yard. It looks like it's half rabbit and half squirrel. He said, Jeffrey, that's impossible. Just go outside and play. He said, Rick, I couldn't believe it. I went outside the next day and there it was, a squabbit, half rabbit and half squirrel. I don't know who was navigating and who was bringing up the rear, but it was a squabbit. No ands, if, buts, or furry tales about it. So I thought, okay, Rick, just keep driving. In about 30 minutes, you won't even be able to see this thing. And that's when my whole truck began to shake and to shimmy. And I thought, Rick, oh, Gray, what's going on? You've been running so well. Well, I pulled that old truck off to the side of the road and I got out, and being the son of a mechanic, I did all the things that a mechanic would normally do to see what's going on. I kicked the tires and made sure the license plate was on top and screwed down the gas cap. Well, can't be the truck. And that's when the whole earth around me began to shake again. Except this time, when I looked over at that nuclear power plant with the great big funnel, it was almost as if I had stuck a fork in a light socket. I couldn't believe it. There was a great big crack in that huge concrete funnel, and that whole concrete funnel began to crack and to crumble. And I thought, must have blown a fuse. That whole great big concrete funnel began to collapse to the ground. It was like a pyramid gone berserk. And then the concrete funnel collapsed, the building collapsed, and it turned into this huge toxic wave about 10 feet high, sweeping in my direction. And I knew that in that toxic wave was everything now emulsified and radioactive that you would find in a nuclear power plant. You know, pipes, valves, and fittings, computer control panels, vending machines, porta-johns, golf carts, little white helmets, everything all emulsified. I thought, Rick, you better get out of here. And sure enough, I jumped in the truck, and right when I went to turn the ignition, I thought, wait a minute, there's something off to the other side of the road. And when I looked over to the other side of the road, there was this little Florida home. And then I could tell that the curtains were closed in the living room. And there was this blue light coming from behind the curtains. And I thought, blue light, home, America, television. Television? This is Saturday morning. Children could be in there. Superman, Bugs Bunny, SpongeBob. I can't let them get nuked. I shut the truck off. I jumped out of the truck. I ran across the front yard. I came to the screen door and I yelled, yo, anybody home? There was no answer. So under the circumstances, I just walked right in. Well, when my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I looked over. There was an old guy in front of the TV, but he was sound asleep. I yelled, hey, is anybody else in the house? That's when the door opened up from the carport into the kitchen. This woman walked in and I guess she had grease on her t-shirt and on her hands. I guess she was changing the oil and the spark plugs on her pickup truck. Well, she stepped in and she said, who are you and what's going on here? I said, look, lady, we've got to get out of here. The nuclear power plant just blue, and there's a toxic wave sweeping this way, devouring everything you find in Florida. Palmetto bugs, rattlesnakes, skunks, tourists. We've got to get out of here. And she said, that's impossible. They told us it was safe and it would bring lots of jobs. I said, lady, that might be the case, but the day shift is heading this way. Radiate, it's the glowworm effect. We've got to get out of here. Is there anybody else in the house? And she said, why, yes, my husband and my daughter. I said, well, where are they? She said, well, my husband's in the bathroom and my daughter's in her bedroom. I said, okay, you get the old timer, get him in the backyard. I'll get your husband and the girl. I started to run through the living room and she yelled at me, stop where you are. And I stopped and I turned around. I said, lady, what's the problem? She said, where do you think you're going? I said, I'm going to get your husband and the girl. And she said, no, you're not. My husband is in the bathroom. He's brushing his teeth and he's blow drying his hair. I said, lady, in about 5 minutes, he's not going to have any hair. He ain't even going to have any teeth. We've got to get out of here. Look, you go get your daughter and the girl. I'll get the old timer. Well, I walked over, I picked up that old guy. I hauled him off into the backyard. I set him down in a lounge chair next to the barbecue grill and swimming pool. And that's when the girl and her father and the mother came storming out the back door. They stormed over to me, and the man said, who are you and what's going on here? And I said, not much, mister, just that. We turned around and looked. Now that toxic wave was sweeping right toward us. It was slurping down trees like boiled asparagus. I said, look, we've got to get out of here and we don't have much time. Okay, let me think. Wave, water, boat. And I thought, boat? Fool? What good is a boat going to do you in a toxic wave? It'll just eat the boat out from underneath you. I said, okay, look, is there anything around here that can fly? And the guy said, yeah, there's a kid down the road's got a hang glider. Now, I didn't want to embarrass this man in front of his family, but 4 adults and a little girl on a hang glider off a flat roof in Florida, that was an idea going nowhere. I said, look, is there anything around here that can fly? The little girl looked over in the corner of the backyard. Now, this is the old days, because right there in that backyard was one of those great big old satellite dishes about 12 feet in diameter. Her father looked over there, he saw it, and he said, Donna, don't be ridiculous. I said, no, Donna, that's perfect. I said, look, everybody, get in the dish. Donna, go inside the house, find the remote control. Now, you know how it is nowadays. They got those little plastic boxes so you can lie on your butt all day on the couch and change the channel, never have to get up. I said, Donna, go inside the house and get the remote control. Well, the girl took off. I helped the old guy get in the satellite dish. I helped the woman get in the dish. I helped the other guy get in the dish. And that's when the little girl ran out into the backyard. She yelled, I found it. I said, throw it to your father. She took that remote control and she threw it to her dad. By then I looked around. That toxic ooze was now in the backyard. The girl came running up. I picked the girl up, I put her in the dish, and I said to her father, hurry up, find the channel with all the reruns. And that's when I looked around, the toxic ooze was just a couple of feet away. I jumped up into that satellite dish, the toxic ooze swept up underneath. It began to melt and disintegrate the stand, bringing us ever closer to a toxic death. I said, find the channel with all the reruns. The guy had the remote control. He pushed a couple of buttons, and then he said, oh, I got it right here. Too bad. It's Star Trek. We've already seen it 40 times. I said, that's perfect. I took the remote control, I stuck it up to my ear, and at that very moment, up there somewhere, Kirk, Scotty, and Spock walked onto the deck of the Enterprise. I said, Scotty, beam us up. Just then, that satellite dish started spinning around in circles faster and faster. And then just before that satellite dish lifted up off the ground, I looked around to make sure everybody was okay. Everybody was holding on. The old guy was holding on, but he had a big grin on his face. And that's when I looked at the little girl. She had an absolute expression of horror on her face. I said, Donna, what's the matter? She said, what about your truck? I looked over there, that toxic ooze was moving in on my old antique truck. There was only one little swath about 10 feet wide where that old truck could get out to the highway. And I whistled. The headlights blinked on. I said, Old Gray, go back to New York State. I'll meet you there as soon as I can. The old truck took off. The satellite dish lifted into the air. And do you know, that's a good truck, because when I'm sitting at my desk, looking out the window down at the driveway, I can see that old truck. Another trip south on Highway 17 near Palatka. It's a true story. That story, actually, everything did happen except for the whole nuclear. I mean, I did drive by the nuclear power plant and then all that silly stuff just kind of came to my head. But
You made the right move by setting it in Florida. You can believe just about anything when that's.
That's right. So as a storyteller doing school programs, what I found many years ago when I first started, I had a buddy who played dulcimer, and he would go with me. And this is when I was just beginning to learn that I was a storyteller. And in between stories, he would play and sing songs with the kids, a lot of the old American folk songs. And I realized, oh, wow, what a great transition from one story to another. So I taught myself to play guitar, and then I started making up my own songs. Well, today I was trying to get this set up so I could actually play the guitar, but I had a feeling it might not work. But with the little ones, kindergartners, first and second graders, I often would do simple songs that I could just do with them with the snapping of my fingers. So I'm going to share a song with you this is I would have to say my latest song. My mom, who was 88, just moved along a year ago, and she was an elementary school teacher and a wonderful mom and a wonderful teacher. And so I guess in homage to her, I made up a little song that I'd like to share with you. And it's, I'm just going to snap my fingers as part of the chorus. And it's called The Old Lady and the Shoe. And it goes like this. Dee-da-da-dum, da-dee-da-da-dum, da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dum, da-dum. There was an old lady who lived in a shoe. She had a hot, kind heart. She was me and you. She had a great big smile and an even bigger heart. She was born that way from her end to the start. Da-dee-da-dee-dum, da-dee-da-da-dum, da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dum, da-da. There was an old lady who lived in a shoe. Her doors were wide open, it was like a zoo. She had mice in the cupboards and ants on the floor. She put cheese on the crackers, they came back for more. Da-dee-da-dee-dum, da-dee-da-dum, da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da-dum, da-dum. There was an old lady who lived in a shoe. She said, come on in, let me welcome you. I got a great big kettle and an even bigger pot. I got a dog named Kitty and a cat named Spot. Da dee da dee da da dee da dum da dee da dee da dee da dum da dum. There was an old lady who lived in a shoe. She loved the wild flowers and the spiders too. She said, hi to the morning, sweet dreams to the night. She waved goodbye with her smile till you were out of sight. Da dee da dee dum, da dee da dum. There was an old lady who lived in a shoe. Thank you. The second story that I would like to share is a new story. The first one was from my third book, Earth Tales and Birdsong. And I have a fourth collection that will be coming out digitally. In the old days, I was, as a self-published author, I would have my books printed. And then, of course, I sold them directly to the kids as I would in my school programs. And I would travel around throughout New York State and Florida and Arkansas. And as I mentioned, and then I went back into the classroom in '95 because I had two boys come along, and being a traveling author, storyteller, being gone for long periods of time wasn't practical. So I went back into the classroom. But then as a retired classroom teacher, I went back to writing. So I have a new collection that will be coming out soon digitally. And this is a story that from that collection that I'd like to share with you. And this is a story, again, where I took a real experience and wrote it down as it actually began to happen and just let my imagination go. And the story is called Josie. And the story goes like this. Many years ago, there was an old man and an old dog, and it was a fall day. It was beautiful outside. The sun was shining. It was cool, but it was beautiful outside. Without the leaves on the branches, the sun could shine onto the forest floor. And in this particular forest, there was a lot of beech. So the beechwood, the ground was covered with these hues of gold and browns and yellows. And it was just beautiful. And on this particular day, they had wandered a little bit farther than they normally do, but they walked every day. The man liked to call it their outdoor physical spiritual hour. Now, the dog was an old yellow lab, a good old mama dog with her floppy ears and her big round eyes and brown eyes. And she was just beautiful. And she liked this old guy because they walked a lot, and she would usually go out in front of them. And when they were younger, they jogged and ran, but now they just walked together. Well, they walked to a spot where the man realized, as you know, when you go on a hike, at some point you have to turn around and go back home. And they weren't getting any younger. So the man said, why don't we, Josie, why don't we just stop here for a minute and take a rest? So the man looked over and he noticed that there was an old stump. This is an old logging trail. There was an old stump. And then just a few feet away was a great big old ash tree that had probably been growing there for decades. So the man said, Josie, this would be a good place to stop. So he sat on the stump, and the dog lay down in the leaves. But she turned her body so she could face the man. Number one, he talked to her a lot, and she liked to watch his face when he talked to her. Plus, she knew if she was close enough, at some point he'd reach over and scratch between her ears. So the dog lay down, and the man sat there on the stump, and he began to look at this big old ash tree. And what he noticed is what down at the base of the tree, because it was so old, there was this big mat, a beautiful mat of green mosses growing. But also at the very base of the tree, there was bark exposed. And that exposed bark caught the man's attention. So he stared at it and he looked at it, and he wasn't sure if he was seeing what he thought he saw, but he stared at it long enough that it caught the dog's attention. So she turned to see what the man was staring at. And finally, when the man was sure that it was what he thought it was, he said, "Josie, there's a door. There's a door in the bottom of that tree." And the dog said, "Looks like a door to me." The man turned and he looked at the dog. He said, "Holy moly, Josie, you just talked." And the dog said, "Well, of course I did." The man said, "Josie, how long have you been able to talk?" And the dog replied, "Ever since I was a puppy." The man said, "Why haven't you ever talked before?" And the old dog said, "Didn't have to. You seem to fill up the space." And the old guy said, "You mean I talk too much or a lot?" And the dog said, "Well, sometimes when you get into politics, you get a little carried away." He said, "Oh, all right, fair enough." They turned and looked back at the door in the bottom of the tree. Now, the door was about the size of a paperback book, but it was beautiful. It was hewn of wood. It looked like it, I mean, it was so old that it was built back, back in the days when the elves and the dwarves and the dragons roamed freely. It was the pre-Trump era. And there was a little wooden handle, beautifully carved. And the man said, I wonder what's back there." And the dog said, "Why don't you open it? Find out." So the man got down on one knee and he leaned over and he grabbed that little handle and he pulled it, and that old door creaked, and there was this puff of old musty air that wafted into the man's nose, and he could tell it been there a long time. He looked at the dog and he could see those little pads on her nose move, so he could tell that she smelled it as well. He said, "Wowza, Josie, that there is a passageway behind that doorway. Where do you suppose it goes?" She said, "Only one way to find out." He said, "Josie, how are we supposed to get through that little door?" And she looked at him. She often thought this guy was a piece of work. She said, "Come on. Here's this ancient door in the bottom of a tree, and you and I are sitting here on this beautiful day having this conversation. Of course we can go through it." The man said, "Okay, let's go." So the man stood up and stretched, and the dog stood up and stretched. And then he looked at the dog, and the dog looked at him, and he looked back at the dog, and the dog looked at him. And the man finally said, "Well, okay, let's go." The dog said, "Well, what are you waiting for?" And the man said, "Well, wait a minute. You're the dog. You always go first. That's your job." The dog said, "Really? My job to go first? Why is that?" The man said, "Well, Josie, you're the dog. Dogs go first, to look for snakes, rattlesnakes, weirdos. I mean, look for booby traps." And the dog looked at the old guy. She shook her head and she said, "Booby traps? Really? Since when have we ever walked through the woods where we had to look for booby traps?" And he said, "Well, it's the only thing I could come up with after rattlesnakes and weirdos." And I guess it was kind of lame. But hey, it's what I came up with. She said, "Okay, well, what's your job?" Well, he didn't want to sound lame 2 times in a row. So this time he decided just to think about it a little bit more. And then he said, well, how about this? I used to work to make money. So I bought this house that we live in, and it's out in the country. So we can go out at night and see the stars. We can go out anytime we want to, pee outside. I built the pond. I buy the food. I buy the firewood to keep us warm. I pay the taxes. The dog said, okay, I got it. Good point. Let's go. So the man and the dog went into the passageway. And after they had walked a bit in the darkness of the passageway, the man looked back over his shoulder. He only could see a little patch of white light back there where they had come in. And the old guy said, Josie, hold up. The dog stopped. She turned around and looked at him. And the old guy said, Josie, are you sure you're going to be able to find our way back out of here? And that old dog said, come on, I got this. Thank you. That's Josie. And she was a real dog, by the way. So to end my session with you, unless you have some questions, there are a couple of other things I would like to share. First of all, remember I'm a storyteller of an ancient tradition, and that is part of that tradition, especially being used to performing in front of children, librarians, and teachers. I realized that in the ancient tradition, it's my responsibility to close with a magic trick. So, oh no, wait, please, had to shuffle around so many computers to make this work. I misplaced my hat. Don't go away. Oh, perfect. Here it is. So now, remember, if you have grandchildren, you are certainly welcome to use this trick. There's no extra charge. And so, magic, you just have to believe in it and go with it. So I'm going to perform a magic trick for you. So ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do now, first I have to show you, I'm going to tip this back so that you can see that oh dear, where is it? How to make it work? Oh, I don't know how to turn this thing, but you have to trust me that the light's on, okay? So there is a light on, and what I'm going to do with this hat is I'm going to turn out the lights. Now, I don't know if this is going to work where you are. It might, because this is pretty powerful stuff. So actually, this might even work because you're with me. It's like being in a room together, except different. So this might actually work. So if you have a light on, you're going to be in for a big surprise. So what's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm going to use this simple, ordinary cap, and I'm going to use it to turn out the lights in your space and in mine. But first, please observe that I'll try to back this up. There are no strings. There are no wires. There's no trap door. There's nothing in my hands. There's nothing up my sleeve. And there's nothing up my pant leg. So on the count of 3, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take this winter cap. Now, if you remember, you're a kindergartner or a first grader. That's what you got to do to make this work. I'm going to take this cap, and on the count of 3, I'm going to turn out the lights. Here we go. Hold your breath. 1, 2, 3. Who turned out the lights? Who turned out the lights? Who turned out the lights? Oh, did yours go out? Well, if they didn't, I don't know, there must be something wrong with the magic. Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, no extra charge for the magic. However, before I actually let you go, I do feel that I should share with you a full-fledged adult story. And this will just take a second of your time, just a minute. I learned this story from a storyteller whose name was Gamble Rogers. He was a wonderful storyteller. And he was an incredible writer, funny guy. And he made up this story. And I'm just sharing it with you. So it goes like this. There's this city fella, and he's out in the country driving around his little sports car. Well, he gets out of town a ways, and there's this old country hardware store, and he decides just to stop to go in and see what might be there. So this guy pulls his little sports car into that parking lot, and when he parks, right next to him is this great big old pickup truck. And that pickup truck, it's about 6 feet off the ground, but when you get out, you're going to fall out instead of stepping out. And it's got rifles in the back window. And when the guy looks in the back of the truck, there's this Doberman Pinscher. And this dog's got to weigh about 200 pounds. It's got that big old leather collar around its neck with the spikes poking out. There's this great big chain that's got the dog chained down in the back of the truck. Well, that city fella, he walks into the hardware store. And when he goes in, he says, excuse me, who owns the Doberman Pinscher in the pickup truck? That's when this cowboy turns around. The cowboy says, I do. Why? And the city fella replies, Mister, your dog is dead. And that cowboy says, my dog's dead? What are you talking about, buddy? That dog weighs 250 pounds. He's been police trained. He's been army trained. He'll kill anything on the drop of a hat. What are you talking about? My dog's dead. Who killed my dog? And that city fella says, my dog did. And that cowboy says, your dog? What kind of dog do you have? And the city fella replies, a Chihuahua. And the cowboy, he says, a Chihuahua? How did a Chihuahua kill my dog? And the city fella replies, well, right now he's caught in his throat. That's a little adult entertainment. Thank you all very much. I know if I can just take a minute to have a plug. I mean, I do have a website, and my sons have been gracious enough to put my stories and songs on there, so that if you go to this website, you can, it doesn't cost you anything. It's free. My stories and songs for young people and folks of all ages are there, or you can email me if you like. But there you have it. So
what's
What's the website?
your site?
So it's Gilmare, GILM as in Mary, ERE, and then the number 61 at Gmail. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's my email address. Never mind. Forget that part.
No, Pam.
The website is, this is all one word, Earth, Tales, and Bird Song. All one word, Earth, Tales, and birdsong.com. And that'll take you to the website and give you an idea of my work with children and young adults, and teachers and librarians. Right.
Well done.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's very interesting.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.
I just put the website into the chat, so if you want to see right there.
Great.
And I don't know. Thank you, Rick. Does anybody have comments? Anything?
Yeah, I do. I've been watching the wonderful house right behind you. Did you build that house? It's lovely.
Carol, I wish I could say yes, but my wife and I, we originally lived in this old farmhouse over in Candor. It was 100 years old, and it was so wet in the summertime that my wife and second son actually became allergic to it. But I couldn't complain because we lived in this old farmhouse on 350 acres, and the guy only charged me $250 a year to live there.
Word.
Because why would I want to leave? So, but my wife, she's put up with me a lot over the years, and she just wanted her own house. So we found this place about 25 years ago. I live on Pelto Road. This house was built by Eddie Pelto. His mom and dad used to own 850 acres up on this mountaintop. She divided it up and gave her 6 children little plots of land. Eddie, who's a guy like our age, this was his plot, and he built this house with wood cut from the woods. It was
Oh, wow.
a sawmill. And one of the interesting things about this home is that's a post and beam, and there are no nails in
Wow.
the main frame of this
Oh my
house.
word.
He built it in the old style. And of course, when I first came in to look at it and I looked around, it was unfinished. There were just, plywood on the floors. There were no railings back there. But in order for us to buy it, the code enforcement officers, since we had 2 young children, said, well, you have to have railings up there. So it's set back off the road, so we don't have any neighbors. I mean, I can hear them off in the distance, but it lends itself to me with my earth spirit and the stories that I write for young people. We have a beautiful home in the country. And of course, one son lives in Philadelphia and the other's now in Oaxaca, Mexico. So I don't know where I went wrong, but both of my boys live in urban areas, and I don't know what happened, but
Well, it's very magical looking.
Yeah.
we're very fortunate to live here.
Mm.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You are
Yeah.
welcome. It's my
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you. We hope to hear from you again too.
Yeah. That was really fun today.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would be glad to come back anytime. And maybe when it gets to where we can be in person, we could have a venue where I could come and share this stories with you in person.
You're
Yeah.
terrific.
This
And
is
the
a
talk.
substitute for an in-person breakfast that we do once a month.
Oh,
Hopefully in a couple months, we'll be back doing that rather than Zoom.
that would be great. I'd love to do that.
More magic.
And more I've got a whole bunch of them. You just have to remember, you got to be like, 5, 6, or 7.
That's us. That's us.
Just very quickly, I learned, being in front of children, that when I'm with adults, I don't really do adults. I mean, you guys, I think, are the first group I've actually done an adult storytelling session with, because when I get around adults, I'm more self-conscious, whereas put me in front of a group of children with librarians and teachers, and as my wife, looks at me, I can get pretty stupid, but there's something about being around them that brings this middle school teacher out. So that's where the magic tricks come in.
You're
Just like
real-
the schooler. Maybe elementary school for us.
Yes.
I think the over 75 crowd shares some things with the 5, 6, and 7-year-olds.
Right.
Ah.
Right.
You bet. And it's nice seeing all of you. And hopefully I'll get to see you in person sometime.
Thanks so much.
Likewise.
That would be
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again.
Everyone.
All righty.